Before you scroll one single inch further, before you close this tab, before you check another notification on your phone, you need to understand that what you are about to hear is not a rumor, it is not a hot take manufactured in some basement by a bored sports blogger, and it is absolutely not the kind of story the mainstream tennis media has any intention of covering honestly, because right now, in the wake of one of the most seismic upsets in recent women's tennis history, Rafael Nadal, the most decorated, most respected, most emotionally guarded champion the sport has ever produced, has done something so unexpected, so direct, and so thunderously powerful that the entire global tennis world has been knocked completely sideways, and the shockwaves of his words are still violently rattling through every locker room, every executive boardroom, and every television broadcast booth on the planet, because when the king of clay decides to open his mouth and publicly go off about a 20-year-old Filipina phenom named Alex Eala, you do not casually scroll past that moment, you stop everything, you lean in, and you listen with every single nerve in your body, because history is being made in real time and most people are going to be too distracted to realize it until it is far, far too late to claim they saw it coming. Now let's set the scene properly, because context is everything here, and without understanding the full magnitude of what led to this extraordinary moment, you simply cannot grasp why Nadal's explosive public declaration has sent such a catastrophic, bone-rattling tremor through the foundations of the WTA Tour. Alex Eala, a product of the legendary Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, stepped onto the biggest court of her young career at Indian Wells and did something that the American tennis media had been quietly praying would never happen. She walked out under those blinding stadium lights, faced the heavily promoted, massively sponsored, red, white, and blue darling of the establishment, and she systematically, methodically, and without a single moment of hesitation, took apart Coco Gauff's game like a surgeon removing a splinter, piece by piece, point by point, until the match ended in a stunning retirement after barely 54 minutes of play, and the crowd that had gathered expecting to crown their chosen queen instead sat in stunned, bewildered silence, staring at a scoreboard that their collective brains simply refused to process. But here is where the story stops being about tennis scores and starts being about something infinitely more explosive, because what happened after that match, what happened in the hours that followed, when the stadium emptied and the cameras were supposed to move on to the next narrative, is the real reason your heart is currently beating just a little bit faster right now. Because that is when Rafael Nadal went off. Not behind closed doors. Not in a quiet private message. Publicly, directly, with the full weight of his name, his legacy, and his incomprehensible global influence placed squarely, deliberately, and unmistakably behind Alex Eala for the entire world to witness. And that is when things took a completely unexpected turn that nobody in the establishment saw coming, and nobody in the establishment knows how to stop. You have to understand something fundamental about Rafael Nadal to truly feel the seismic weight of this moment. This is a man who spent over 2 decades winning 22 Grand Slam titles, conquering Roland Garros 14 times, fighting through injuries that would have ended the careers of lesser human beings, and throughout all of that, he has maintained a carefully guarded, almost sacred discipline about what he chooses to say publicly and whose name he chooses to elevate with his platform. Nadal does not do endorsements for the sake of visibility. He does not hand out praise like candy at a parade. When Rafael Nadal decides to stand up and publicly declare that someone has earned his admiration, his respect, and his full-throated backing, that is not a casual gesture. That is a coronation, and every single person inside the tennis world knows exactly what it means when the king decides to place his crown on someone's head. So when his words about Eala exploded across social media and began flooding into the phones of players sitting in the Indian Wells Players' Lounge, the reaction was not polite applause. The reaction was the kind of stunned, throat-tightening silence that fills a room when everyone present simultaneously realizes that the order of things has just been permanently rearranged. The established veterans, the women who have spent years grinding through back-to-back tour weeks, flying economy class before they were famous, sacrificing their bodies on hard courts and clay courts and grass courts all over the world to build a reputation inch by painful inch, suddenly found themselves staring at their screens, reading Nadal's words about a 20-year-old who graduated from his academy, and feeling something cold and unfamiliar creeping up from the pit of their stomachs. And what happened next shocked everyone in the stadium, because the players who were supposed to stay quiet, the veterans who were supposed to keep their composure and give their standard PR-trained non-answers to the waiting journalists, started cracking. Sources close to the locker room whispered of conversations happening in hushed, urgent tones, of players pulling their coaches into private corners asking questions that nobody had the answers to, of an atmosphere inside the facility shifting from competitive confidence into something closer to existential anxiety. Because Nadal's words were not just praise. They were a declaration of war against the existing hierarchy, and every player on that tour understood the implications without anyone needing to spell them out. Here is what the mainstream sports media refuses to say out loud, because saying it out loud would require them to dismantle a narrative they have spent half a decade carefully constructing and lavishly funding. Alex Eala is not an accident, she is not a lucky streak, and she is absolutely not a fluke that the establishment can quietly sweep under the rug while they reset the promotional machine around their preferred champion. She was built in the most demanding tennis environment on the planet, trained under a philosophy that treats mental weakness the same way a surgeon treats a tumor, as something to be found, identified, and ruthlessly removed. And when Nadal goes off publicly in her defense and in her honor, he is not just speaking as a proud mentor watching a student succeed. He is speaking as the architect of a system that was specifically designed to create champions who do not break, do not back down, and do not accept the limitations that the comfortable and the complacent try to impose on them. And that is precisely why the boardrooms are sweating right now. Because the sponsors, the television networks, the tournament directors who have built their entire promotional architecture around a specific vision of what women's tennis is supposed to look like and who is supposed to be standing at the top of it, they are now facing a young woman who has just beaten their golden child in under an hour, who carries the blessing of the most beloved figure in the sport's modern history, and who responded to the biggest win of her career by grabbing a microphone and graciously thanking her defeated opponent with a smile so calm and so genuine that it somehow felt more devastating than any trash talk could ever be. The veterans plotting in their group chats, the agents recalculating their strategies, the broadcasters scrambling to adjust their narratives. They have all run directly into the same inescapable wall, because you cannot attack Alex Eala without attacking Rafael Nadal, and nobody in professional tennis is stupid enough to pick that fight publicly. She moves through the tour now wrapped in an invisible armor forged on the red clay of Mallorca, and every player who draws her name in a tournament bracket knows they are not just preparing to face a dangerous opponent. They are preparing to face a system, a philosophy, a mentality, and the full gravitational force of a legend who has decided, loudly and without any ambiguity, that this young woman is the future. Look ahead at what is coming and try to breathe calmly, because the calendar is not getting any kinder to the establishment. Roland Garros is approaching. The French Open. 14 Nadal titles. 14 journeys into the cathedral of clay where the king built his myth, point by brutal point, championship by championship, until the red dirt of Paris itself seemed to belong to him by divine right. When Alex Eala walks through the gates of Roland Garros carrying Nadal's public endorsement like a torch, she will not be walking in as a challenger hoping to make a splash. She will be walking in as the heir apparent to a legacy so deeply woven into the fabric of that tournament that the crowd will feel it in their bones the moment her shoes touch the clay. The pressure on anyone scheduled to face her there will be unlike anything the women's tour has experienced in years. Not because she is unbeatable, but because the psychological weight of what she represents, of who stands behind her, of what it means to look across the net and see Rafa Nadal's greatest competitive values staring back at you through the eyes of a composed, fearless 20-year-old, is a burden that most professional athletes are simply not equipped to carry. The revolution that the establishment tried to slow down with whisper campaigns, cold shoulders, and manufactured medical narratives has not just arrived at their doorstep. It has walked through the front door, sat down at the head of the table, and when the most powerful voice in the history of the sport stood up and went off in its defense, the last lock on the last door of the old order finally, irreversibly, and permanently broke open. Alex Eala is no longer climbing. She is leading. And the only question left for every player, every executive, and every doubter watching from the comfortable safety of their manufactured certainties is not whether she can reach the top. It is whether anyone, anywhere on this tour, has what it takes to stop her before she collects everything the sport has to offer and rewrites the entire story of women's tennis in the process.